You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. And as always, you know, if you want to get more leads and deals online, you know where to go. It's AdWordsNerds.com. We can help you out. This week, we are coming in with an absolutely killer interview with Andrew Newlon from Ozarks House Buyers.com. If you don't know Andrew, him and his small team have done over 139 deals in the past year in just two relatively small markets. They have done it the old-fashioned way by connecting with people and really paying attention to the details. This is a really fun interview. We talk about where the market's been, where Andrew thinks it's going. We've talked about process. We've talked about running your investment business like that, a business. We've talked about the importance of follow-up. We talk about the marketing channels that he's using right now that are working. We talk about his experiment with TV ads and so much more. I cannot wait for you to check out this interview with Andrew Newlon. So without any further ado, let's get straight to the interview. All right, I am here with Andrew Newlon from OzarksHouseBuyers.com. Andrew, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
So I've got a whole bunch of stuff. We were talking before, like we started recording, and we got a whole bunch of stuff I want to get into. But for people that don't know you, aren't familiar with what you're doing over at Ozarks House Buyers, give people like the elevator pitch. Who are you? What's your business? What kind of investing do you guys do?
Yeah, we are a small real estate investment company in Springfield, Missouri. So that's the southwest part of Missouri, the Ozarks, and in Lubbock, Texas, on the west side of Texas. Similar markets. They're both 150 to 250,000 people in population. Then we have a small MSA area, nothing to get crazy about. But we focus on three things. We buy a bunch of rental properties, we do some fix and flips, and we wholesale properties as well. And so this year, I think we did 139 deals in both markets for 2021. Significant growth in Lubbock. Lubbock is much newer than our Springfield operations. But one team that serves both markets, and we're really good with direct to sellers. So we do a lot of marketing to sellers through online ads, through our website, through direct to mail, some outbound dialing and texting. And then that's our kind of like our unique ability is working with the sellers out of their tough situations and turn around and either sell it to another investor, which we don't do that as much as fix and flips now, and then have a rental portfolio as well.
Now, did you get started primarily wholesaling and move into fix and flips and rentals, or did you kind of start doing everything off the board?
We actually started with a couple rentals. Like we didn't know what we were doing. When I was much younger, I was working on some friends. One of my friend's dad was a landlord. So we were working on his houses just for work in the summertime and stuff.
Just like fixing them up, basically?
Yeah, he was teaching us how to do drywall, lay flooring and trim and hang cabinets. And it's just, he's like, hey, you boys want to come over and make some money? I'm like, sure. Had no desire, had no idea what real estate was. Wasn't even a thought. But I did know he had a bunch of rental properties, and he was what he called free, right? He wasn't extremely wealthy, but he was his own boss and do whatever he wanted. And then fast forward a couple of years, my friend and I was like, hey, why don't we buy a bunch of rental properties? So we entered the game thinking we buy a couple of properties at a time, fix them ourselves, and eventually we'd be, chilling on some beach and a small island, and, the Caribbean's, super wealthy. Quickly learned that that's a very slow progress. That we couldn't quit our jobs, and we were working till 1 o'clock in the morning. Remodeling these houses, weekends, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. I mean, all the holidays we were working, bust our butt. So we didn't have the income, and we went to a couple of the guru boot camps of real estate and stuff, and then we figured out what wholesaling was. We weren't attracted to it, but we went through the steps and we sent out the letters. We put some bandit signs out, and we got some traction. We actually did a deal or two. And so we quickly realized that we could at least do enough deals to replace our income, so we didn't have to work so late remodeling these houses, bring up to speed. And it turned out we were really good at it. So we just kept going. And so there was a pivotal moment where we switched our mindset to where we are a wholesaling business. We entered a mastermind that, taught us how to structure it a little bit better. And then, in the last 18 months, we've kind of pivoted to where we're not wholesalers, we're real estate investors. We do everything.
Now, let me ask you, so you mentioned at some point, you kind of started getting traction, started getting a couple deals, and you kind of realized like, oh, we're good at this.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like what clicked for you where you're like, oh, this is something I can really do and I can do well?
I think it was not necessarily a skill set. It was more that we were taking action. We're doing it. We weren't afraid of messing it up or not having all the answers. So we were sending out the letters. We were figuring out how to hire people to take the phone calls. We were going out there and talking to people, getting houses under contract. We were building a lot of good relationships. We were working our buyers at the time backwards almost, because I think most people get a wholesale and they're scared what to do with their house, especially if you have ethics, right? No one wants to get these houses under contract and not be able to sell them.
Right.
Most of the people we work with are in difficult situations. And there was a time where we wouldn't close on these houses. We close on everything. Even if we're going to wholesale, we buy every single house we put under contract. But there was a time period we couldn't. We didn't have the private money raised to do that. And so we knew our buyers very, very well. We went to lunch, we went, had coffee, we supported them, we helped them out in their projects. And so we built really good relationships to where we can get this house and kind of work it backwards. Say, hey, what do you need to buy it for? And as soon as we started figuring out each of our buyers' niches, then we can make something out of every single lead coming through. That and the fact that we could remodel the houses ourselves too helped out a lot. So we quickly realized that if we couldn't wholesale it, we'll buy it, do the work ourselves, cut down on the costs, and we keep it as a rental.
Was it kind of like, it strikes me, it sounds kind of familiar, right? Although totally different skill set to kind of when I started sort of transitioning from just being a freelancer to really running AdWords Nerds as an agency. And one of the sort of turning points is that moment when you're like I wasn't a business person by background, right? I came from like being a touring musician and then being a teacher. And so there was always this thing in the back of my head where it's like, well, business is something that like dudes in 3-piece suits do. You know what I mean? Like I didn't think of myself as being good at business. And there was some turning point where you're like, oh, I am kind of good at this. It's just working with people. I know how to do that. Is that kind of what it was? It's like, oh, I could actually run this more as a business and understand it at a deeper level than maybe you thought you could do when you were primarily just putting up drywall and stuff like that.
I think that's the thing. I see it more now, but a few years ago, I think it was normal to get into the business, do all the work yourself. You take the phone calls, you look at the houses, you put it under contract, you're working on the houses, and you still have traditional people like that. It's that concept of like, what can I step out of? Like, we can really structure this as a business. I'm the same way. I have no business background at all in any way, shape, or form. Right. And I had leadership experiences, and I quickly realized, like, if I can just get the right people on the team, train them what to do, then we can repeat this at a higher scale. So once we realized, all we were was exposed to other people doing hundreds of deals a year, the same thing we're doing, and realized like the possibility was there. You just had to rearrange yourself.
So when you made that kind of business mindset switch, you mentioned that before too, right? You sort of really started running it as a business. Was it primarily about that shift of focus away from doing everything yourself to building a team? Was it something else? Like what was that kind of switch?
It was team. We hired a lead manager to take phone calls and help us a lot of like the admin tasks. So realizing that we can bring someone on and afford it, consistency. So prior to that shift, we would do some marketing, get a deal, and wait until we're ready for our next deal to do more marketing. So truly look at it as an investment, like, hey, we're going to spend X amount a month and we will get that return. We just have to stick with it over and over. And then processes, like how do we actually streamline this, use actual software, what happens when a call comes in, and put more of a parameter on what we do. At the very beginning, anytime you get a lead, you're like, how can I make money out of this deal? In every situation, every which way. But it got to a point like, hey, if it's not one of these 2 or 3 things, we're just going to pass on it so we can streamline this and make it, a consistent movement.
Let's talk a little bit. I want to transition a little bit and talk about the market. We were talking about the market earlier before we kind of press record. And, you and I are recording this in early 2022, which still, it's early enough in the year where it sounds weird to say it out loud, right? So it's like every time I write it, I'm like, this feels weird. So really early 2022, we're coming off of one of the weirder years in real estate in memory.
Right.
Talk me through a little bit about what the last couple of years have been like for you guys, there's been a whole bunch of, we're talking about displacement from the pandemic, and a lot of real estate markets heated up, some shifted really fundamentally, and you guys are kind of in these two different markets that are both a little similar to one another. So what's that story been like for you guys?
Yeah, fortunately for us, our two markets are almost identical. I mean, price range, your demographics, your industries, so we got really lucky there. I couldn't imagine being in small town USA and then in, say, San Diego at the same time. Like, that's two different sets of operations and procedures and everything. So we got really lucky there. But the last 2 years have been a blessing in disguise. I think at the very beginning, we had a quick shock of like, how are you going to handle yourself if there's a dramatic change in our business or in the marketplace? And then we all kind of forgot about it because, the market was very forgiving and, took off very well. For us, people are migrating like crazy. People are leaving California, West Coast, East Coast, Texas, all these different states that are changing and the population is booming. There are people native to those areas that are trying to move out. And not necessarily to us, but to local areas like Kansas City and St. Louis. Well, those natives are trying to move more rural. So this rural migration is what we call it, has really helped us a lot.
So you got people from really, really gigantic metro areas moving to smaller metro areas, and people from smaller metro areas moving into more suburban, more rural. Interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that. So
it's kind of like a cascading event.
Yeah, fascinating.
So we get both.
You guys see the people moving to where you aren't so much, I sold my Sex and the City Manhattan style apartment or whatever, and I'm moving to Lubbock. It's more like, people from Kansas City or whatever. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to. That's fast.
Yeah, both. We're seeing both of that, right? So we are getting a lot of. I would say our number one offers are coming from people from California.
Yeah,
and they're our favorites because they're usually cash sight unseen, and that's kind of simmered a little bit. It's not like it was last year.
Yeah,
but we get this huge rural migration. The prices are cheaper here.
Yeah,
it's the cost of living. A lot of people are able to work remotely now. And so if you're in Silicon Valley, I got a family member that works for a big tech company, and the pay cut he took to move is less than the per diem he's getting. And so he's making just as much money, if not more. He moved from San Francisco over to Kansas City,
right,
working from remote, and nothing's changed. So the cost of living is extremely low where we're at. And then the fear, if you have concerns with COVID or population or, social distancing, obviously you come to a smaller town, it's a lot more open. On the flip side to that, if you want a town that's less radical on their decision-making on how to approach COVID stuff, you definitely have that as well. We're not locked down. We didn't suffer what these big cities and liberal states have suffered. And so we just have so many things why people want to move, and they appeal to all audiences.
It's really fascinating, right? Like I'm very curious, like 10 years from now, right? If we look back and say that was the time where we really like shuffled the deck population wise, right? Like, it's like, what is that going to, like, what does that mean? Right. It's going to be so interesting in terms of housing prices. You were saying you guys are still seeing a basic upward trajectory, but you feel like the slope is a little less extreme. So it's not so much, the billionaire from California that's like, I paid $4 billion for a one-room apartment, or whatever it is. Yeah. But it's still up, but it's a little more even. You feel like it's
still increasing. And I don't think it's going to stop for a while. Like, I really think an event has to happen. And I think, kind of back to what we were saying earlier too, with this migration thing, is we've entered a new society to where I think dramatic events are going to be more regionalized, right? So if there was a market crash or something, I think it's going to be in specific regions instead of across the nation. I think we're balancing ourselves out a little bit, like our eggs are in different baskets as a nation.
Yeah.
So to play back into that, our prices are still climbing. They're not as climbing as much as they were before, but they're still going to climb. I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon, but that buyer activity has slowed. So we're not getting a dozen or two offers within, the first 12 hours. We're not getting a lot of highs and bests or no appraisals on inspections. They're starting to come back to, your normal offer structures.
Yeah.
But we're still selling for full asking price, sometimes a little bit more within 24 hours. Like it's still very much a seller's market, but the activity seems to slow down a little bit. Prices are still going up. Every time I buy a house, and then by the time we get done rehab and go to market, we always list it for much more than what we thought we were listing for when we bought it. So
are you seeing, like, do you peg that as, like we kind of talked about this a little bit. The 2021 was really this kind of multiple effect sort of year where you had a lot of things driving people into investment markets of various types, right? We were just chatting and I was saying, I kind of got interested in crypto. Crypto saw this boom year. Like everything kind of saw a boom year, right? I don't know this for a fact, but somebody tells me like baseball cards saw a boom year, or like my band put out a record 10 years ago. That record sold more last year than it sold 10 years ago because people got into like vinyl record collecting. Like it was just a weird year. People just bought a lot of stuff. So there's sort of a simmering of demand. Have you seen a rise in supply? Because I know like a huge part of that narrative of last year was there's a lot of demand for stuff and you couldn't get a lot of stuff. There was sort of limited housing supply. There was construction sort of supply limitations. You couldn't buy a PlayStation. It was like all sorts of stuff was happening all at the same time. Have you seen that kind of loosening up a little bit, at least where you guys are? Or
no, I think supply is an issue across the country. I think that is one thing is not regionalized because it all comes from the same place. Housing, definitely. I mean, because money is so cheap and accessible right now. And so everyone is able to go out there and buy another property. So these people that want to start investing in properties are buying single family houses and duplexes and stuff. And their pro formas are different. They're not as conservative as say we might be as active investors, and so that plays a huge role in the supply as well. As far as the rehabs, actually, like materials, it's still an issue. Every week there's something new that we can't get our hands on. The biggest is labor. We just cannot get the right people to work in any position in our company, whether it's sales, management, projects, construction. I mean, construction is really tough. I was talking to someone that works in the HR industry, and construction is the third hardest position to hire for right now in the country. Next to sales is number 2. So it's like, it's a very difficult time.
That's really interesting. It's funny because it's like, again, totally different industry, right? But literally the same thing in the marketing space, where if you're looking for someone with some background in what you're doing, some experience, it's really hard to find them.
Yeah.
And it's really hard, even if you want to offshore it, it's hard to find, right? So and that's something that, I have the ability of, like, if I want to hire someone from Yugoslavia, I can.
Right.
If you're from Yugoslavia and you're listening to this, call me. No, not really. But you know what I mean? But it's like, but for construction, you can't, there's no remote.
No.
You can't do it remote, right? So I can see how that would be even more constrained. So how have you guys adapted to that? It's like, look, it's a hard constraint on the number of deals that you can do. Are you trying to like train from the bottom up? Like, how are you guys thinking about that problem?
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
I feel like we can do more volume, and we've been smart enough lately to say we need to slow down. Like, we're not overly aggressive. I mean, we really put ourselves in a bad bind at the beginning of, beginning of 2020. We were financially in a hard spot as a company because we tried to grow way too quickly, and aligned with COVID at the same time. So we had a lot of lessons learned. So right now we're saying, hey, we watch like our cash conversion cycle and stuff. And so when it's taking us longer to rehab these houses, and from the moment we close on the house and purchase it to the moment we sell it, as that gets longer and longer, we want to take less and less on. And so, it's just understanding the timing restraints, building it into our prices a little bit more that, hey, if I'm going to hold on to this for 6 months instead of 3 months, then obviously it's going to cost me that much more, double in interest, double and holding costs, utilities, taxes, insurance, things like that. building or training from the ground up has definitely been successful for us. Our team is primarily made of people that were previously in a management position, store managers, assistant store managers, recruiters that were in some type of corporate field that they couldn't grow or they didn't like the corporate bureaucracy. They want to be a part of a team where their voice was heard and they could share their passion and they aligned with our passion or vision. And so bring them in, they knew nothing about real estate, knew nothing about an industry, but they had the experience on managing or growing, and that's what they wanted. So bring them in and let them speak, let them have their voice heard. And so, we're not getting the highest and best person that has experience doing what they're doing. We just have capable people that we can train from the bottom. That's helped out a lot.
I mean, it makes so much sense too, right? Because if you're just saying the only way we can compete for talent is on salary, that's, sorry, but you just can't do that, right? But that kind of person who, and I would be this kind of person, right? Where it's like, yes, I want to make money, but more than anything, I want to feel like what I do matters. And it matters I want to feel like I have some autonomy, I have some control over my life, I have some impact. And you are going to get so much more of that with a company like Ozarks House Buyers than you're going to get working at Hyperglobo Megacorp, because, you got to pass in your TPS report on time or whatever. It's just, I think that whole idea of building a certain kind of work environment, I think people now are much more attuned to that and value it so much more. And I'm kind of belaboring the point because I think, I've talked about this on other shows, but I think for real estate investors now, there's so much more competition. There's so much more competition from both the top and the bottom, right? You've got huge hedge funds entering the space, iBuyers, whatever. You've got we were talking about this before, like so many more people getting into investing. And for the type of investor that I work with, the type of investor that like you and I kind of generally are going to know, who want to do, 100 deals a month, but aren't necessarily looking to be the CEO of Hyperglobo Megacorp. It's how do you create a work environment that attracts that valuable talent with something other than pure salary, right? And maybe it's, equity or whatever, it's a share of growth or whatever, but
I don't think it comes down to the money. I'm sitting here thinking, I've got several people on our team that have taken a decrease in salary or hourly wage, whatever it might be, because it was worth getting out of the position they were in. When you're a store manager for a big retail store for, 8-9 years and you don't have growth other than outside of that as a regional manager and you don't want to relocate, but you're tired of being yelled at every day, or you're the one that you don't get to turn off at night, right? There is no 6 o'clock I'm going home, and you're getting that 2 o'clock phone call because the alarm goes off or something. To be able to come back and say, I'm going to lose a little bit on the salary, but I'm going to be part of a team where my voice is heard and cared about and asked for, and I get to help build this. Like they all get excited they're building this. I leave town for a week, come back, and there's something new in the company. They've implemented a new process, a new system, new software, or something. And those people get excited. They get, they like it. And then you start putting into so one of our core values is impact others. And so when we start making a difference in other people's lives and they get to choose that difference, they get to choose who we're going to impact and how we're going to allocate those funds or man hours, or whatever it is. It really is a lot different than that corporate feel. And then you surround yourself with people. It's just a reciprocal, so that you come to the office where these people are super, super excited about what they're doing. It makes you excited versus a bunch of people that are just checking in, checking out. No one shows up right at 8:30 and no one leaves right at 5 o'clock in our office. And that just does not happen. It's a great feeling. Yeah.
I mean, there is, I don't know. It's interesting. It does feel like, and this is really big macro view, right? But as the things in society become more accessible, the things that you need to live, right? Food, shelter, some kind of sense that you are able to make enough, right? As those things become more common or more accessible, it becomes more about fun. Where can I have fun?
Right.
And ultimately what you're talking about is it's fun to build stuff. For a certain kind of person, that's what gets them up in the morning, right? It's not so much just adding another $100 to the paycheck. And I think I really like the idea of we kind of compete for talent with fun.
Right.
And it's that excitement, that sense of kind of adrenaline you get when you build something cool. Let's talk marketing a little bit. This is the REI Marketing Nerds podcast. I should mention marketing. I know you guys do a bunch of different marketing. You mentioned texting and all sorts of stuff. So for what are you guys doing marketing wise right now? You can keep it high level, but just kind of where are the buckets that you're sort of using and what's been working well, what isn't working well? How do you kind of see that space?
So the two buckets that we've always used and never stopped is direct mail and online ads. We've always stuck with it. We know that there's always many low times. There's times that direct mail just doesn't hit right. And same thing with ads and with you guys or Facebook and stuff. We go, a month or two, like, man, it just didn't do well. But we look at it as a long-term investment. That's how we measure ROI as long-term. We never look at anything less than a 90-day window. We want to look 90 days all the way up to a year and say, okay, for the last 12 months, we're getting, or we at least see 3 times our money back on this. So those are always nonstop running in the background. They're hands up. We've tried a gauntlet of other stuff. I think at the end of the day, that's the one thing that you can consistently rely on to predict those numbers. We do some outbound texting. I'm not a big fan of it. Same thing with cold calling. I think, I don't want to be on the other end of that as well. And I think there's so many people out there in that space that, fortunately for our marketplace, both of them, there's not near as much competition. Like it's all relative, if you boil it down per population, I'm sure our competition relates to other places, but our sellers aren't getting 24 text messages a day. As I've got a friend in Memphis. He was talking to one of his buddies, and he literally brought up his phone. Like, this is what I'm getting every single day, like a daily basis. So it doesn't happen right here. So we can get away with it. So we do it when things are slow. We'll do some outbound cold calling, texting. We work our system very well. So all these that we've talked to, constantly follow up with them. We did TV ads last year. It was fruitful. But it was too much. Too many leads. We couldn't qualify quick enough to get the right people, the right appointments. Yeah. The volume of phone calls causes not to answer the phone calls from our good buckets, from direct mail. So you're answering all these calls from people that, they sell us on TV and they'll sell their $500,000 house for $500,000. We couldn't call the seller back that really needed our services and needed to sell his house quickly. So
can you give me a sense? Because I'm interested in that. The TV thing is interesting to me. It's not something that we do specifically, right? But it's kind of, it has always seemed to me kind of like you're describing a giant fire hose, right? Which is like good and bad. So can you give me a sense of the general lead quality in these, like how it relates to the different buckets? If you got like mail, and you've got online ads, you've got TV, and then you've got kind of the cold outreach, whether it's cold calling or texting. Do those feel very different in terms of how they react, how they close? Like, what's your sense of that?
Yeah, it's so much so that we rank them in priority when we call people back. And so, we can't answer all the phone. Our goal is to have above 90% live answer rate. So when 90% of people call in, we try to answer it live.
Right.
But it isn't always happening, especially if the whole team's on a meeting or something. So we actually rank it. Website leads get first priority day in and day out. We want to get back to less than a minute. And then direct mail. And then say if we did turn on TV ads again, that they'd be very last. So it's kind of like anything coming off our web forms is like a sniper shot. Like we are pretty certain this person knows who we are, what we do, and what we offer. And so we want to get back to them. They're a qualified lead, 70% of the time. That's an arbitrary number, but it's a high percentage. Direct mail, we do have to weed through a lot of people calling like, hey, take me off your list, or hey, I got your postcard, what's this about? But most people, because we put our website on it, they've gone and looked at who we are. They kind of have an idea. They are getting 4 other postcards and stuff. So we start to broaden it a little bit more. We get more people to talk to. They're not all deals, but they are, they're targeted too. They're getting our message for a reason. They're on our list for one thing or another. TV, you're speaking to everyone, every single person, and you can't control that. Say, hey, I want my TV ad to only show up on, absentee owners' TVs or whatever. And it's really hard to get your message across what you do, what you offer in 30 seconds. And your region, you can't control your region. So we get rural really fast where we're at. And our TV, our TV ads go into Arkansas. We don't do anything now in Arkansas. We're getting all these Arkansas leads. And so the team doesn't know that when you're answering it.
Yeah.
So we at the time we turned on TV ads, I think we were probably averaging 70 to 80 leads a month. And that first month we had over 400 leads.
Wow. So like a literal like
quadrupled
3 or 4 times. Yeah.
And at the time it felt good. Like, oh, this is great, and we're thinking like, how many deals more do we have to do just to pay for the TV ads, right? But what we didn't realize was it wasn't a 1-for-1. We could not physically answer all those 400 phone calls and call 400 people back and go on all 400 appointments. And so we're losing on, we knew this list was working. We couldn't call these people back because we were too busy chasing people that we didn't have business talking to.
Is it opportunity cost, right? I think that is such a fascinating point. And I think it's one of those things where until you go through it, it is not intuitive, right?
Right.
We generally think of, and I'm the same way, right? When I take on a project or a marketing channel or something, you think of it as additive, but you don't factor in the reality that all resources are limited. And even if you are purely just adding on, it does take away from what's already working. So that's really, really fascinating to me. I think, we've talked a little bit about, and you mentioned this kind of several times. You said like one of the strengths of your company is that, from the very beginning, you were just really good with working with people, right? You're really good at sort of forming that relationship with people. You mentioned it kind of in a different way where you're talking about outbound, you're talking about cold calling, cold texting or whatever. And you're like, well, I don't like to receive those, so I don't like to send them, right? Which is like, it's kind of the way I think about it, right? It's like, well, what kind of marketing do I actually prefer to receive or whatever? And I try to lead with it. So how do you think about both the follow-up process? Because I think, over time at AdWords Nerds, we've very much seen an incredibly strong correlation between clients that follow up often and well, and the clients that close a lot and have a lot of success with online advertising, right? So how do you think about the follow-up process? And then once you followed up, how do you think about building that relationship with the seller and sort of doing that whole part of the deal structure well? Like, how do you think about that stuff?
I mean, follow-up is beyond important. Like you can't not, we put a price tag on every lead that comes in. Like we have a cost per lead for a company. And if you don't follow up the person, you're literally writing that check and just throwing it in a trash can every single time. 98% of the people we buy houses from are facing a distress situation in their life. It's not always about the house. Sometimes it is. So sometimes it's something else going on in their life. Because of that, calling Andrew back with Ozarks house buyers is not their priority list to do that day. In fact, when they filled out that web form or they did call off that postcard, it was probably just the prime time for them to get it done. It was 10:30 at night. They just logged off of Facebook. They were like, let me look this person up and see what the heck, I'll send my information. But the following day, they had to face that distress situation all day long. And I just was not the top of the list to call me back.
Right.
And so if I take that for face value, say, hey, they're not really motivated, then we lose out on a deal because so many times, we have a whole entire bucket, what we call attempt to contact. So, there's a large percentage of people that call into us and we didn't get hold of, or web forms that we don't call back. We don't ever give up on those people. And they're hearing from us daily for weeks and then weekly forever. And there's a large amount of them that eventually say, hey, I'm so sorry. I know you've been trying to get a hold of us, but yeah, I am ready now. For them, it's a big process. And to us, it's easy. You buy a house and sell a house, and we think it's all done within 24 hours. Right. All these people sit on it for months and months, if not years, before they finally, make that decision. So if you're not doing it, you're throwing that money away. Figure out what your cost per lead is and ask yourself, are you comfortable just writing that check and throwing it in a trash can?
I think you're getting at something I think is so critical, which is, I think we tend to think if someone contacted us, they must be ready to go. And if I call them back tomorrow, they should still be ready to go.
Right.
It's like, that's not really how it works, right? Like the other thing too, you kind of hit on is that, I forget who said this, right? But I think a lot of people prefer the certainty of a low level of pain over the uncertainty of relieving that pain, right? So it's like, yes, this house is, I got to pay for it or whatever. It's just sitting there. It's a pain in my butt. I got to think about it. But I'm already in that situation. And if I go into this new situation, it might end up being way better for me where I could sell the house to an investor, make some money, like everything is going to be way better. But I'm uncertain about what's it going to entail, and do I have to sign a bunch of paperwork, and what's it going to be like? It's easier to just do nothing for the vast majority of people, right?
How many people have a gym membership they pay monthly but don't go to the gym? Why do they just call and cancel it, right? Just call and cancel it. But you're like, what's another $10?
Well, so it's so funny that I no longer have it. I built a gym I say I built a gym. But when I say I built a gym, My wife set up a gym in our garage. So there you go. I go there now. But I used to belong to Anytime Fitness, and I was a member at Anytime Fitness well into COVID times, and I wasn't going. And it's like, well, why didn't I cancel it? Well, they said you had to go in to cancel it. You had to cancel it in person. And I was like, I'd rather pay $5 a month or whatever I was paying.
Drive across town.
And it just, so it's, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
We can really tie this in though. Like that's a good example. So it's not so much just the drive, right? But when you go in and talk to that person at the counter, what do you think they're going to say? What do you think they're going to do?
They're going to try to strong-arm me.
Then you give you 2 months off, and then you sign this 12 month, and you just want to be sold. So that $5 is totally worth not being sold. We have to view ourselves like our customers view ourselves. They know we're buying at a discount. There's no one that ever calls us thinks we're getting full price for their house. They know that we have a way of discovering if they're going to take our offer or not, right? It's a sales process. It's no different from going to a car lot. You know you're going to be sold.
Right.
So if you're like me, if you have to call AT&T to talk to them about discrepancy in your bill, right? You had a late fee, you weren't really late, it's $30. You're like, I got to call this person. I don't do it right away because I don't have to talk to someone in a different country that speaks a different language that I can't relate to. They're going to give me some resistance. I got to talk to their manager, and I know I'm going to be on the phone for 2.5 hours. I work up that courage, and it might take me a month or two before I'm like, you know what? Enough's enough. I'm going to call them today. It took me 2.5 months for that prime time. Stars aligned. I'm ready to take action today. And if I call and I don't get connected to someone, I'm not going to be in that perfect alignment for maybe another 2.5 months. I think our sellers are the same way. They know who we are. They know what we're doing. And we provide a good value, but it's no different from buying a car. They know they're going to go through a sales process, and our goal is to buy as cheap as we can. Mm-hmm. They're waiting for that perfect time. Like, okay, the pain, like you're saying, the pain is enough today, right now at this moment at 10:33 at night to call these people. They didn't answer. Screw it. I'll just deal with this house for another month or two before I make another decision.
Right.
You take that to face value, you're losing an opportunity because they're going to call in 2.5 months. But who are they going to call? The person that stayed in contact with them?
Yeah.
If you didn't, they forgot who your name was. They're going to go find someone else.
I think that's, if I could, so if you're listening to this podcast right now, please take this to heart. This is the thing, by the way. I think this trend of having more difficulty or a longer sales cycle, right? I think that is increasing because if you have more competition as an investor, which by the way, you do in pretty much any market, then people have more options. They're going to weigh those options. They're going to be more familiar with you. It just lengthens that process, right?
Right. And
just the world is more distracting. Right? It's just, there's more stuff going on. There's this kind of barrage of information. People have trouble. It's like, it's like I was watching my wife go through this the other day. Like she's trying to get a group of her friends to hang out. They're all going to go hang out outside, right? Just hang out. And these are friends that really love each other, have been friends forever. But it's hard to get your friends to hang out with you. It's hard because we were like, I got the text and I didn't reply for a day because like I was burned out. It just, you have to be persistent in your follow-up, but compassionate when you understand like everyone's going through some version of that, right? Yeah. I think that's really, really smart to keep in mind. And I think you guys are just doing such an incredible job. I don't want to keep you too long. We're coming up on an hour. This was a really fantastic and really useful conversation. For people that want to learn a little bit more about you and about Ozarks House Buyers, is there somewhere online that they should go check you out?
Yeah, we have our business page at Ozarks House Buyers on Facebook. Got my personal page, Andrew Newlon on Facebook. Same for Instagram. I think our handle or username, whatever it's called, is Ozarks House Buyers. And then mine is Newlon_Andrew.
Okay.
On Instagram. And then
I will grab, by the way, just if you're listening to this, all these I'm going to grab. I'm going to put in the show notes. AdWordsNerds.com/podcast. You can go find Andrew's episode and I'll link to that as well. So it's Newlon_Andrew, you said on Instagram?
Yeah, yep, that's correct. And we're also in Lubbock, Texas too. So our company out there is 806 House Buyers, as well as the area code 806. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram with that as well.
Cool. Yeah, definitely go check Andrew out. I will say, Andrew, too, you've always been super open and like helpful. Like we share some mastermind stuff together and you're just a really approachable person. So anybody that wants to go check it out, OzarksHouseBuyers.com is the website. I highly recommend it. Andrew Newlon, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
And that is it for this week's episode. Look, as always, I really, really deeply appreciate you listening to this show every week. And did you know I have a Facebook group? It's totally free. It's adwordsnerds.com/group. That's adwordsnerds.com/group. Request to join. No spam. Only good content. I'm in there answering questions, going live, doing all sorts of stuff every single week, and we would love to have you. And as always, this is Daniel Barrett from the AdWords Nerds team signing off. I will see you next week. Cheers.
This is the podcastfactory.com.